Well, hello, all our Starvista Live cruisers, watchers, and of course, our 70s rock and romance fans. Your virtual cruise host, Jason, back again with another all access pass from home. Today, I'm very excited to sit down with Mr. Gino Vannelli. Gino, how are you, sir?
I'm really fine with Jason.
Thank you so much for being a part of this. We know that everyone's got time on their hands, but still, it's an effort, and we do appreciate you taking some time to be with us and our fans. And we were just chatting before we jumped on camera here. You are phoning in from, we're in the same neck of the woods. I'm in Portland, Oregon here, and you're also down this way.
Yeah, I'm just a little past Troutdale. What people call it the Columbia Gorge, and we get, in the summertime to go visit the river. That's kind of where you're from, in that neck of the woods. So
Yep.
many windsurfers there and kite surfers, and it's really a marvel to watch.
It's now for people that don't know. First, I would say the Columbia Gorge is one of the most beautiful stretches of land in the world. You've been blessed to travel the world. I've been blessed to travel the world. Columbia Gorge really, truly is a stunning area.
It is.
Uh, it, it's if people haven't seen it before, I would encourage, if you're out this way, just it's not a long drive. You can drive it. You can drive at least the western stretch of it in an hour and a half, and just stunning. But I would ask, as a Canadian boy, what brought you out this way?
Well, I kind of, circled the United States because
Yeah.
I left Montreal when I was 18 years old and lived in New York for a year and a half, trying to, pan for gold there. And then I went back to Montreal, but then I got a flight to Los Angeles, and I spent 4 or 5 months there, and I signed with A&M Records in the early 70s. And by the mid 80s, I felt that Southern California was changing and I wanted to leave. And I also felt the decentralization of the music business, the dawning of it.
Sure.
And with the computer age and social networking just on the cusp. And so we moved up to Oregon 1990, 91. And it wasn't, there was a little bit going on here, but not that
Yeah.
much.
No.
We built a studio in the Northwest, and moved all the way out to the gorge later on. And in 1990, the gorge was just really out in the boonies, and now it's not that far, obviously, because Portland has grown so much.
Yeah.
But that's how I sort of circled the perimeter of the United States.
That's very cool. Well, we're glad to have you. We're glad to now steal you and call you one of our own, whether you like it or not. We were also just bantering. You said you live on a little bit of property out there, and you've also recognized something that I've recognized intimately, which is Oregon wildlife is no joke. They take many different forms, and one of the most notorious forms is the mole. The Oregon moles are an aggressive sort. You said you've gone on a rampage to try to control the mole.
Well, when I first moved here, we lived in Southern California, so we had what's the little varmint called? It'll come to me. But I didn't know anything about moles, and they're very prehistoric. They're actually quite wily in their own ways. They're very instinctual, and they actually can become very trap smart. And
Oh yeah.
And it was all kinds of theories. And at the beginning, I told Tricia, look, just leave it alone. Let the right to life.
How much damage can they do?
Yeah. Until her whole garden was destroyed, and so on and so on, and trees were dying, and so we said, okay, well, we're going into protection mode here. So I had to call the guy they call the mole expert, and he got off his truck, and my God, he looked like a mole.
Well, it helps to get in you got to get in the spirit of the animal. Yeah.
Well, he told me to trap a mole, you got to think like a mole. Okay.
Even more so to look like one, just takes you to the next level. Yeah.
So after I trapped my first mole, I figured that was it. And 18 years later, I think it's over 200 now. But really, that's not the real issue where we live. There was at least 2 or 3 bear sightings. My wife, we got our floors done last year, and the stench was so bad. We went to shower at a friend's house just down the road, and Tricia got out of the shower and had her robe drove on and just stepped outside, and about 100 feet from her was a very big male black bear. And so we've run into bears on the streets, and our neighbor 3 doors down had a 150-pound cougar in his
Yeah.
front yard. And of course there's a lot of coyotes. And so you learn, in the Columbia Gorge, there are times of day where you sort of don't
Yeah.
venture out into
Yeah.
the mist.
Completely. Listen, we were just discussing a few minutes ago that I live in Eastern Portland, so I'm on the edge of a big city, but right next to it, it's not like Portland ends and then it's just wilderness. Portland ends and then there's a small city and a small city for those
Yeah.
watching. So I'm in between kind of a big city and a small city, and there's a small natural reserve called Powell Butte, which
Yeah.
And I mean, we had 3 cougar sightings on Powell Butte last year. I mean, and we're in the middle of a city. There's only so much, and not to go this direction, but there's only so much deforestation. There's only so much habitat you can take. I mean, the animals.
No, obviously there's pressure on the animals.
Yeah.
And it's everyone's trying to survive. Everyone's trying to exist. So you can't fault them for that.
Yeah.
They have taken a few dogs. They have taken some sheep, some goats, and
they're big. People don't recognize how big they are. They think they're here kitty. These are not here kitty. These are big, big creatures.
Yeah. Quite a treacherous animal. Now we have our 2 Aussies, on our property, and so they tend to not want to come around.
Yeah.
What we do have is the wiliest coyotes that try to actually bait the dogs into coming with them, and then attack from behind.
That's old canine behavior too. Old wolf behavior, canine behavior, coyote and wolf behavior is to send in a female, typically a female in heat, to try to drag dogs out in a way, or or a male dog, whatever it is, whatever is going to attract the dog. They try to send in and then drag, slowly, coyly pull them out, and then
Yep. There's a lot to learn about human behavior by watching animals.
My wife and I talk about it all the time, how crazy it is that, the dissimilarities are less than you think.
Well, the basic instincts are there.
Yeah, good word for it. So you guys said you have a garden. What do you guys grow? Are you a gardener as well, or is it mostly?
Well, I kind of help, but my wife's got the green thumb. She loves, cucumbers and peppers and zucchini and carrots and tomatoes and nothing like a crudité, which is a summer garden.
Yeah.
I mean, the taste is picked fresh from the garden. Your salad is just an amazing thing when you eat a fresh tomato, fresh lettuce.
I grew up with that. Like I was telling you a little earlier, my family has 40 acres out in the middle of the woods, middle of the woods, way off the grid, no running water, no electricity. And that's how I grew up till I was 14. And so, you didn't shop a lot. You didn't go to many grocery stores. And so we had a huge garden and a lot of non-perishable, we'd buy non-perishable, the 70-pound bag of rice type deal. But we had a huge garden. And to exactly your point, my mom used to give me a bowl and just go get your salad, and you go pick exactly what you wanted in your salad and bring back your salad.
And nothing quite tastes like it.
Absolutely. My wife has just decided that she wants to try to be a green thumb as well. So she has 4 herbs and a tomato plant, and that's where she's going to start. She's going to start small.
Yeah. But once you develop the palate for it, you want it all the time.
It's interesting too, because you probably recognize this. I know you recognize this from our conversation. Once you start eating and having things either homegrown or fresh from the vine, it really changes the way store-bought things taste. And I don't want to sound, I'm not trying to sound highbrow, but it changes the way things like that taste. A store-bought apple or tomato.
About wanting, the tips of your lettuce not to be black. There's nothing highbrow about not wanting a curled up tomato.
That's fair. That's fair.
And
that's fair.
The hydroponic tomatoes don't really taste all that good.
They're watery.
Yeah, they're watery, and they're not really deep red, and they don't have this sweet kind of savory combination taste. So I mean, they're good in a pinch, but they're not like homegrown.
the depth of flavor, to exactly your point. I mean, my mom still lives up on that property,
Yeah,
and she sends down just boxes of tomatoes, because they grow so many in this garden. And my wife and I go through them like gangbusters. So
yeah.
my wife has now decided that she doesn't want to eat store-bought tomatoes. So for the rest of the year, it puts us in a tough spot because she's so addicted now to my mom's homegrown ranch tomatoes.
Well, that's why you kind of try to eat seasonal.
Yeah, true. Very, very true. This is a good place to do it, the Northwest.
Well, everywhere. I mean, if you're living in California, you can grow
Yeah,
just about anything. And if you're living in Florida,
yeah.
South Carolina, Georgia, you can grow many, through many months of the year.
Do you have are you into vegetables more? I mean, are you a vegetarian? Do you eat meat? Are you into all of it or?
For different reasons. For different reasons than most people would think. I try to leave the moral component out of it
Yeah,
because there's a lot of things that we pick and choose about morality that really
absolutely.
suit our purpose. And it's like someone telling me, how could anybody hunt a deer and all that? Well, and how could you eat a chicken? So I try not to get into that rationale, but I do look at it from the vantage point of what are the farms like? How are they being raised? How many head of cattle per stall?
Sure.
All that kind of stuff. How much antibiotics are they given? Are they
Yeah.
corn fed? Where is this corn from? Are they eating ethanol? I mean,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And you'd be surprised that if you really do your homework, then you whittle it down to just a few companies that are really doing it right. And when if I do eat beef or if I do eat chicken, I want the highest quality and the chicken that's lived the best life possible,
Sure.
and or else I'm not interested
Sure.
because I can actually taste it now. When
Yeah.
we go to restaurants and all that, I love to eat a good meal like everybody else,
Yeah.
but I'm not into beef that has the texture of the sole of my shoe, and I'm not into chicken that tastes like an Indian rubber ball. And so that way you sort of narrow your taste. So it's not
Yeah.
moral; it's more culinary.
Sure.
And at the same time, I think that as I studied more and more, my friend, a really close friend of mine, is an herbalist. We need really a lot less protein than we do think we need. We need quality protein, but you don't need to be eating meat twice a day.
A,
I
a
think
gram per pound of body weight. Yeah.
no, I think once or twice a week is plenty. But it does leave you with at least that ambition to try to make your vegetable meals,
Hmm.
really succulent and really savory. So Trisha really is into either going out to the organic farmers
Markets.
markets or
And yeah.
whatever, or growing. But like last night, we'd have like yams, potatoes, carrots, broccoli, a few other things, all steamed with some rice, and it's really satisfying.
Yeah.
And then once in a while, she'll get some free range turkey and cook that. And that way, I think when you kind of limit it to high quality, I think it does. You do end up performing a sort of moral, sorry, duty that is really not an intentional moral duty. It's
Mhm.
more being very picky.
Well, I mean, there's at a certain point, depending on where you live in the world, right? I think we all we can be pickier based on where we live to a certain extent. If
I know
if
that.
you live in wine country, you tend to be a little more sensitive with your wines and et
Sure.
cetera, et cetera. And the Northwest, we do have farmers markets all over the
Yes.
place. We do have people with sustainable farms all over the place.
Yep.
So I think we have an ability that is really wonderful.
I agree, and I visited and I performed in many countries where food is not that abundant,
Yeah.
or at least it's more limited, it's more packaged, and they need to get it sent in and all that.
Yeah.
Of course, you can't be as choosy, but if you have the choice, like for instance, in most of the Western countries, we do have a choice to eat well or not, and when you see people, living on Twinkies and all that, you know that you're not going to be as in good health, especially now with the sign of our times. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the key components of trying to survive these viruses, especially this latest virus that's come out, is everybody knows is being as healthy as you can be
Yes.
and having a strong immune system.
Yeah.
And so some of that other food we talk about, that's really not a food. It's just some kind of filler that you could probably buy, from DuPont or Home Depot. It doesn't really serve your body. Your body's trying to figure out what to do with it. So I think with time, your immune system and your health overall is not as rude as it should be. Now, for people who travel like me, who still perform, I'm going to be 68 in this June.
Wow.
Being in optimal health
You look
is
phenomenal.
really it really is really the only way to do it. Or
That
else
actually,
you can't do it.
I was literally going to segue directly into that when you started talking about it. For someone that performs and for someone that travels as much as you do, I don't know that people always recognize the toll that takes.
Oh, yeah.
People think a show is just you jogging up on stage and singing a couple of songs, and then it's not that easy. It's not that simple. It's a workout in itself, and the travel and all of this and the that and the next thing. Is a lot of your, and I think you just kind of touched on it, but a lot of your health conscious nature, I'm assuming, is based on the fact that you need it personally as well.
Personally, I've been this way since I was a young teenager, you just adolescent, because I always knew that I wanted to perform and that I wanted to travel. So
From what age were you pretty little when that started?
12,
Okay, so yeah,
11.
young, yeah, young.
Yeah, because I needed stamina to play the drums, and I would play for 7 or 8 hours a day, and it would really wear me out.
Yeah.
A lot of body movement and sweating and things like that. And then when I started traveling around the province of Quebec, playing with my group, carrying that B3 upstairs and the drums and all that, it would take a lot out of you. And then by the time I was 15, 16 years old, we were playing in clubs, some not so savory clubs, but we do from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning, do 5 or 6 sets, and it would 6 days a week, and sometimes a matinee on Saturday or Sunday. So I always knew that, wow, I had to be in really great health. And then now, all these years later, if you're to travel to Europe or just go to the East Coast or wherever, it's always 5, 6 hours. But you need to get to the airport 3 hours before, so on and so forth. So it's a full day's travel, and then you need to perform the next day. So if you're not going to give your audience the best you can, why do it? And
Great message.
That's really what why I do what I do. And there's a certain kind of regimen you have to kind of develop as well as follow with time, because time and age dictate what you can be doing. For instance, when at a certain time doing chin-ups was great. At a certain age, doing chin-ups just kind of destroys some of your joints, and it's not really good for you. So something else, you have to replace it with something else, which will keep you in relatively good cardio and good muscle tone and strength, and at the same time boost your immune system.
One of the things I've noticed that's kind of interesting, and I'd be curious your thoughts here. So Starvista Live does a 50s cruise, they do a 60s cruise, they do a 70s cruise, and on the list. We have in the 50s cruise, and we still have a lot of original artists. In the 70s cruise, we still have a lot of original artists.
Right.
In the 60s cruise, we don't have as many original artists. To exactly our conversation we're having right now, do you accredit that to kind of the lifestyle?
I just give Timothy Leary full credit.
Yeah.
People experimented in the 60s, which in a sense was mind-opening drugs. But what it opened the mind to still remains to be, judged, because most of the things that I remember my friends said they had an incredible experience. I sang in green or something like that. A lot of it is just a very subjective experience.
Sure.
But the damage done to brain cells and
Yeah.
to other parts of the body was astronomical. And for the most part, a lot of artists being in a sense OCD that most of us are, we're just eternally, obsessed.
Sure.
Never knew when to give it up, and gave it up in most cases much too late.
Yeah. I just, it kind of fascinates me when we do our 50s cruise and we have so many original artists. I mean,
Yeah,
granted, I say so many with, within reason. We
sure.
still have a lot of original artists from the 50s, that are still. Chubby Checker's in his 80s, and I will watch Chubby Checker walk on stage, puff his chest up, and go out and do 2 shows in a night and beat Chubby
Wow,
Checker, right? And
good
he's
for him.
twisting, huckabucking, and twisting, and
Yeah, yeah,
he's in the audience, and
yeah,
he's in his 80s, and he's
yeah. No,
to
that's
your
bless him.
yeah, to your point, right? I mean, he's still a healthy guy. He talks a lot. I've sat and talked to him a lot, and he says a lot of similar things to what you're saying. That I take care of myself. I try to not get too out of shape, and I try, I watch my weight, and I do my scales, and I do this, and it's his craft, and
Yeah, and the thing I think, Jason, is everybody knows those things, but it's to have a regimen, an
sure.
every day or every other day a regimen that you stick to, and that's the
Yeah.
hardest part. And I was lucky because in my youth, I was going to become one of three things. I was either going to become a performer or a singer-songwriter. That was always in the cards. The second thing was I love literature and I wanted to become a literature teacher.
Hmm.
I admired the late poets in those days and I wanted to teach. Looking back, that wouldn't have been such a great choice. And then the third thing was that I wanted to join the Canadian Navy because I wanted to see
Really?
and I knew that I had the discipline to actually be, a military man. So in some ways, I took that military discipline
Sure.
to my art, and I've been
Mhm.
able to say, okay, today I do this today, and I need to do this regimen vocally today, or this regimen, for my body. Like for instance, we have a rebounder. I don't know if you know what that is, but a rebounder is a small trampoline.
Yes.
And all the astronauts use that,
Yeah.
when they come back from space because their muscle tone is just nearly gone. And so without fail, I'll do a half an hour a day. And that really is great for cardio. And it's also very soft on your joints. So you're not walking around with runner's knees
Yeah.
or,
Boy, do I know it. Yeah.
yeah, or hips that are just out of joint.
It's interesting though, as you talk about creating those habits, because I think people, I read a lot, and I listen when I do run, and as I'm running or walking the dogs or whatever, I listen to books on tape. And one of the books I was listening to recently was discussing the emotional brain and the thinking brain, and the constant conversation the two are having. So as you were talking about creating these habits, your emotional brain is often trying to convince you, especially if there are things I don't want to get up at that time, and I don't want to go do that. And your emotional brain is the one dragging its feet going, no, it feels so bad. But then your thinking brain is saying, no, we have to do. And so you constantly have this diatribe in your head that's trying to propel you to exactly what you're saying, ultimately looking for the discipline to find some balance between the two and
I
create the
found
habits.
that if you could, that is just, you get split off when you either fear to do something or when something's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
When something becomes painful or uncomfortable, you'll always have a bifurcation
Yeah.
of yourself. So you'll have this conversation with yourself. When something is really what you really want to do it, you notice that bifurcation is not there. There's no
Everybody agrees. Yeah.
everybody agrees.
Yeah. We're all
But
in.
there's something uncomfortable that suddenly you go, what do you mean?
Yeah.
But
Yes.
if you can
No. Yeah.
show yourself that the outcome is far outweighs the displeasure or the pain or
Mhm.
discomfort of the after effect or the rewards. And when you think about the rewards of being healthy, of feeling good or breathing well or sleeping well
Sure.
or just being healthy, like we're talking about, especially in light of now a new pandemic that's come
Yeah.
around, then you kind of thank yourself
Yeah.
for being the runner and for being the one who's like keeping himself in shape. Now you're a younger guy, so it's not as prevalent a problem for you. But people on the cusp, or even
Sure.
some younger people, have been hit by it because they're not healthy.
Sure.
But as you get older, your immune system does get compromised. Just with
Mhm.
time, time gives you a beating. So the only way to fight it are things that bolster the immune system, and there's no other thing that bolsters the immune system other than proper diet,
Yeah.
proper movement, proper exercise, and trying to keep stress out of your life. That's it. There is no magic bullet. So if you do it by being a Baha, I mean, following the
Mhm.
Baha'i faith, or
Yeah.
if you do it by being a Scientologist, or you do it by being an atheist, because you don't believe in anything, well, then more power to you. But if you
However
find
you get there.
something that connects you, you know, to your internal self, so that you don't really fret about the things that a lot of people fret, day to day, and that you're able to keep up a regimen, and that you do it willfully and happily, because the outcome is always better. um, then you're in better shape.
It's interesting because my wife has some levels of anxiety.
Yeah.
And so she and I talk all the time because I'm not an anxious person. I'm not a stressful person.
Hmm.
uh and I don't think that that's better or worse. We're just different. I don't have the same concerns that she does in life, and we talk all the time about what it is to have anxiety, or what it is to be concerned about things that aren't or
Hmm.
could be or might be. And I always call it creating stress. People that create stress where there isn't necessarily a stress. There could be, but every time you get in the car, could get in a car accident. Every time you walk down the street, there's stress everywhere if you choose to acknowledge the potential of what could happen at any moment.
Yes.
So we talk a lot about take the step in front of you. Take the step you're about to take. Live in the moment you're in, take the step you're going to take, and that's what you worry about. And then you worry about the next step you're going to take. And even if it's literally a staircase step, don't worry about the 10th step. Take the next one, and then the next one. And to
Some of
your
us are born with, talking about your wife for a second. Some of us are born with a sensitivity,
Mhm,
a lower threshold
mhm.
than others. As like for some, I mean, some people just you can't get them out of bed. They sleep so
Yeah,
hard, and some people sleep so light. They go, "What was that?" And it was
yeah,
just a
that's
leaf
me.
rustling.
That's me.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we all have different sensitivities. We all have different
Mhm.
weaknesses. So someone like your wife who has that sensitivity, the best remedy for her is to understand her own sensitivity and deal with it. That's really with it, because we all have something to deal with. I mean, being a
Amen.
writer, I know that I'm obsessive. I've come to terms with that. Once I start on a song or a production or something I want to do, it doesn't let me go. It's like a hound, at my heels, nipping at me, and it's like on my carotid artery, and 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 it gets me into real trouble, because I'll get to like sleepless night after sleepless night,
Sure.
and then I'll start to get a little shaky with fatigue, and
Yeah.
we're all vulnerable to these kind of things. So by just recognizing that I have that kind of nature that can go that way, I could, oh, it's coming on. I
Yeah.
need to say, back off right now. As painful as that might be, I'm going to back off. So your wife, in a sense, needs to know when it's coming, that sensitivity,
Yep.
and like I'm projecting right now,
Mhm.
and I'm going to back off from it. And she's the only one who can really heal herself, because having you carpet her is just going to make her feel like
Yeah.
you got
And
to
it
fight.
does. And it does. We went through that in the beginning where I didn't understand it as well. And I would go, just what are you talking about? Like, what? There's nothing to be, it's beautiful
Right,
outside, right?
right.
And I went through those classic narcissistic responses
Yeah,
where I was looking at it from my own stance, going, what do you mean? Like,
yeah.
and she was going, no, but this is real. And I was going, but it's not real. So we had to have a lot of back, anyway, this isn't about my wife and I, but we had a lot of back and
No,
forth to
I
figure out.
understand that. I understand that, and like I
Yeah.
said, she's the only one who'll be able to.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll ever get healed from it, because it's her personality. That's
Hmm.
the way you are. You're built that way. But you learn how to deal with it. I have a friend, a dear friend, who became an alcoholic, and I said, "Well, tell me about it. I mean, how did you heal yourself from your alcoholism?" He says, "I'm not healed. So I just found a way not to do it." And he says, I said, well, what was the pivotal point? The pivotal point is I woke up in Mexico City and I had a blackout. I didn't know how I got there. I was gone for 2 days out of my life.
Wow.
And so he said, never again.
That's eye-opening.
And he found a higher sense of himself. Some people might call it divinity, but he found something higher that he adhered to. And he just deals with it day to day. And now the habit is that no, he won't even touch an aspirin, or he won't touch anything that will alter his brain chemistry. So when there's enough pain associated with being a certain way, then you say, I don't want to go that way. But it's a day-to-day thing, and he knows
Absolutely. I think that's true for everybody, right? I mean, you have to battle. You have to choose it. We talk about that a lot. That you have to choose it. You have to, every day you have to make your choices, and you have to make your big choices and your small choices. But you have to choose it. You know, you have to choose what you're doing. But anyway, I think we could psychologically go down a lot of paths here. I love chatting with like-minded individuals.
Well, everybody's got. Remember, the compassion is that everybody got something.
Amen.
So,
Amen to that.
you can laugh or deride someone else's sensitivities, but you know someday it'll come to you in some other way, and something will hit you that totally puts you off your center. So, you know, the best that we can do is not lecture so much as just, in a sense, just talk about it, like you say, you talk about with your wife, and but the onus is going to be on her, because it's painful to be that way. It's painful to be concerned and worried all the time. And until that pain actually could turn into a chronic disorder, when it does, then she'll have to say, oh, now it's really seeped into my health and I can't do this anymore.
And she's done a phenomenal job. You know, she's, I think it's hard to look in the mirror, you know, for anybody. As you're saying, it comes to all of us. All of us have something, and that's I couldn't echo something stronger than, no matter how perfect anyone thinks they are, everybody has something. Everybody has something, and looking in the mirror and acknowledging that is very, very hard for people. And one of the proudest moments, one of the experiences I had, that where I experienced the most pride in us, was when she first sat down and actually started talking about something that she viewed as a failure. And again, you know, she started to open up about something that she views it negatively. Her anxiety or her stresses are, and she's not crazy anxious. She just has some levels of it. But when she started to talk about it, I was so impressed and so appreciative to see someone, because I pride myself on trying to do that. I pride myself on trying to be someone that acknowledges weakness. You know, it's only weakness because we hide it, because we put it in I can't, that's embarrassing. I got to put that in the back. And the minute she did that, to your point, she looked in the mirror and she acknowledged that it was hers, and she started discussing it. It was just a slow clap, you know, moment where I was like, wow, that's, to watch someone go through that is a very cool thing.
It is, you know, it takes strength, you know, and you have to actually have to steal the power from some other greater source. That's why a lot of people either turn to mentors, and in a bad way, sometimes people depend on other people, which is not, that's going to disappoint them.
That'll backfire in the end.
For me, this is where true spirituality is born. That you seek something that is a pool of strength that you can draw from, a wellspring of strength that you can draw from. And it has all different kinds of languages. It's called by different things, but in the end, it's something that exists within yourself, that, you know, I mean, Einstein would call it, you know, the human homeostasis. That there's somewhere inside of you, your body and whatever drives your body knows, because, or else you wouldn't be feeling pain. Because when you're not feeling pain and you're perfectly happy, everything's homeostatic. And when something's wrong, you feel upset. You don't even know what it quite is. Why my job is not going well, or why I didn't make the right choice, or why am I with this person, or so something is not quite, you're sort of like lopsided. So something within us understands homeostasis, and it's a question of reaching it. How do you reach it, and how do you visualize it, and how do you remedy it when it's out of balance? That's when spirituality is sort of becoming has become another word for religion, or another word
Yeah.
for the word God, but really what it truly is trying to understand yourself and how to bring yourself to a point where you can move forward in this world in a delightful way.
Well said. Very well
And
said.
that's the only thing that it serves. Because if it doesn't serve anything else than that, then it serves no purpose.
Very well said. Do you find that music and writing and producing and creating, is that part of your homeostasis? Is that part of?
It is a tremendous spiritual endeavor, because as I was 14, 15, 16, and would listen to Lennon McCartney or Cole Porter or George and Ira Gershwin or Jerome Kern or Rodgers and Hammerstein, I'd say, how do I get to that point? How do I write like that? I'm writing these ditties. There's an element here I know that's good. There's an element, and there's no school. So
Yep.
all I could do is study and study and study, and then probe and probe. And boy, as you probe, you go into those inner worlds, those dark inner worlds where there's sort of chaos, but you kind of rummage through the chaos and you see some form. And you wake up one morning and go, oh, let me try this. Let me try that. Oh, that means they went this way. They didn't introduce, the hero of the story till that time. Oh, this is how you write a bridge. You take this harmony and you take the last note of this, and you so on and so forth. And it's the same thing as once you learn the technique of songwriting, then how do you learn to produce it? Well, all those knobs there, what is that? What does EQ mean?
Yeah.
What is treble? What is frequency? Then you realize that everything is a frequency. Your voice, your this, your that. I mean, everything is a waveform. It's a study of the deepest science. And that's how I refer to spirituality. It's the deepest science of humanity. And the deepest science of humanity is knowing what makes us go forward, what makes us happy, what makes us productive, what actually brings life to ourselves and the people around us, and in some cases, the ripple effect even further. And that is the true purpose of spirituality. We can all talk about afterlife and this, but nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe some people have a glimpse.
Yeah.
It's almost like the opening of a camera shutter, for so quick, you're not sure what you saw. But we have this sense, just like I spoke to someone the other day that's a very, very devout atheist, and I said, I understand totally your feeling, but the way I look at, say, the word God, is that, let's say this picture a vase, and that vase is called God. And I said, let's take this vase and throw it against the concrete, basement floor. Picture it. It breaks. And I said, now pick up the smallest possible shard. Pick it up and find it, and you can hardly see it. No matter what, the smallest possible shard belongs to that vase. That's the first thing. Second of all, if you were to say, for a second, just attribute this shard as having some conscientiousness or some self-consciousness, somewhere inside this shard, it knows it belongs to something greater, but it can't figure it out. It doesn't know the shape of it. It doesn't know that it was a vase. It doesn't know any, but the little shard says, I feel that I belong to something greater. It's just my job to find out what it is. And this is how I look at it, that it's a quest of trying to find out what we belong to, what makes us tick, how the system works, where we come from, where we go back to. What I hear, there's like 3 million people a day that die, and about 2 to 3 million are being born. It's a revolving door. How does that work, really? And then the countries or the societies that have the happiest people,
Mm-hmm.
the most productive people, how does that work? What do they believe? How do they feel inside? Is it a sense of community or a sense of individuality, or both? Or there's a lot of studying, to do. And I've always been a proponent of that. So I've always mixed my study of humanities my study of theology, my study of the occult, my study of literature. I'm trying to find out the commonalities of all those philosophies. And I always gravitated towards those who are a little bit more hopeful, although I've read a lot of the desperate philosophers like Nietzsche and Schopenhauer and so on and so forth. But I gravitated towards the more hopeful ones because I always felt the most sacred job a man or woman can do was to bring joy and life to others. And if a philosophy does not bring joy and life and the willingness to live life and find joy and delight in life, then that philosophy is really not worth much to me.
And is that, I mean, could you segue that directly into your view of your music?
Absolutely.
Of what you're trying to do?
Yes. And I always try to, number one, be technically proficient at what I do, because I knew that to master the technical side of it it couldn't be just all feel. That means singing in your shower is good enough, to put you on TV. So you had to understand your vocal cords, intonation, enunciation, pronunciation, how to sing from your diaphragm, your chest, your throat, your head. I mean, all those, it's a real study. People spend their lives, studying the voice and how to sing. Same thing with writing, producing, and so on. So I had to get past the technical stuff. But after you know the technical stuff, like for instance, I learned old school recording, but in the 80s I learned new school recording, all digital, to the point now where I can go in the studio and either hire a band and we can do the whole old school, or I can go in and work with strictly samples, strictly computerized stuff, and make music that I love, at least many other people, in the same way. So old or new or whatever school doesn't bother me. I like them all. What I'm trying to say is, after studying the technique of trying to bring forth this music, the last hurdle is what is motivating me. Why should I go to the studio today? Why should I go to the piano and write? What do I have to say? It's usually something bugging you. It's usually something that needs to come out, that wants to be, it's a birthing pang. And the desire to share. Because, above all else, artists, writers, they have this obsessive desire to share what they know or what they do, or else they wouldn't do
it. Yeah, that's a wonderful thought. It's. Do you think it differentiates? Do you think a thought process like that differentiates someone who doesn't, and I'm going to use horrible terms, doesn't make it, versus someone who has a career that lasts? Someone that isn't necessarily dedicated to that fact as much as they just go in and, oh, I have an idea or a thought, or I'm gonna record somebody else's song, or it's so easy now with YouTube and everything else, and versus someone who puts in the time and the effort and creates a full, true labor of love career.
Well, intention is always the most important thing. I mean, if you're a religious person, if you're an evangelical, and you're born into it, and you don't understand the life and times of Jesus, you can ask yourself all kinds of questions, and you're very swayable. People could really piss you off really quickly because you don't really understand. Yeah. But when you really, really study the times and study the man, study his intentions, then when you understand a man's intentions, then you understand the man. And I'll go back to artists. When artists understand their own intentions, your intentions can lead you through fire, really lead you through good times, bad times, in between times. And my intention from the get-go was to be good at what I do. And whatever my shortcomings were, I mean, another perfect example, the life and times of Rocky Marciano. I mean, YouTube it and study it. He had everything going against him. He was short. He was 5'10" for heavyweight. He was light. He only weighed 188 pounds. Never got to 200 pounds plus. He only had a 67-inch reach. And just to let you know, I mean, I think Muhammad Ali had an 83 or 85-inch reach.
He had a wingspan.
Yeah, I mean, his reach was so close that he could never get close enough to a head to hit it, without getting hit first. He had incredible deficiencies. So he figured out a way to actually overcome his deficiencies. And he said, the only way for me to become champion was to have better cardio and to be stronger than everybody else, and to be able to be in the 15th round and to be able to go like I'm in the first round.
Yeah.
So he developed certain techniques of training that far surpassed anything of the time. And he got so strong that all of his opponents that fought with him said, if he hit me in the arm, he hurt me. So what I'm saying is it's possible. But also, Rocky was smart enough to realize that at one point, when they asked him to fight Floyd Patterson, I think he was still only 32 or 33, that he could have beaten Floyd Patterson, but he quit. And the reason why he quit is he went back to the training camp and he told his wife at the time, I won't do it even for $1 million. And I mean, $1 million was a lot in 1957. And his wife said, why? He says, because it's not that I don't think I could beat him. He says, I can't do the regimen anymore. I don't have it in me to do. So look, we were talking about this, about your wife and all. He had the wherewithal and the courage to look at himself and say, it's over. I'm not going to do this anymore. And so for me, I knew that I had enough talent and enough courage and enough discipline to overcome my weaknesses. One of my weaknesses, when I was 15 or 16, having been raised in Montreal, all my friends were French or Italian, and most Italians spoke French before English. So when I first heard myself being interviewed at 16 years old on a taped television show, I said to myself, oh my God, I sound like a cross between Dudley Do-Right and Sly Stallone and Maurice Chevalier.
Like, this isn't right. Or it's very right. Yeah.
So I knew I had a lot to do to really rid myself of my very thick Montreal accent. And I knew it was a shortcoming. And I asked a lot of people, people that were that dealt with those problems, and the only way to do it was to tape myself and to read the newspaper every day and to self-correct. And it took about a year, 2 years.
That's such a challenging thing to do. To anyone that's ever watched themselves or heard themselves on tape critically,
that's not impossible.
No. It's just hard. Yeah.
Until shaking the dialect, especially the Montreal patois, just became second nature. Now, when I get angry or I'll fly off the handle or get too happy, it sort of sneaks its way back.
I was going to say, when you go back and visit, it's pretty easy to fall back into, I'm sure.
Part of that is because you want to be with your friends and you want to reminisce. But the first thing that strikes me is how the Montreal patois sounds. When I go back, oh my God, that's what I tried to get rid of.
Well, focusing a little bit on those early days, tell us a little bit about, if you don't mind, because I'm sure some people have tuned in to hear about your music, and we've had this wonderful conversation, but we haven't talked a lot about you musically. Tell us a little bit about the early days. You're in your young 20s and you're cracking into the business. Tell us a little bit about that path for you.
Well, I left Montreal. First of all, I got a record deal when I was 17 years old, just out of high school with RCA Victor, and had a minor hit in Canada, enough to kind of whet my appetite. But I figured at the time in 1970, Canada was still in its infancy stages as far as record making and producing and distribution. So I just went off to New York, and I lived there. I lived at my cousin's house for a while, and then I met people, and I ended up staying there for close to a year and a half almost, and learned a lot. I mean, I learned a lot about the business. I met a lot of the top A&R people at the time, learned how record companies operate, made so many demos, had a few offers, but not until I met Herb Alpert that I knew that this was the right combination. Because I always admired the fact
And
that he had
Herb was
signed,
A&M, right?
yeah,
Sorry. Okay.
I always admired the fact that he signed a lot of artists that I respected at the time, whether it was, you know, Sergio Mendes or Quincy Jones or the Carpenters or Joe Cocker or Cat
Hmm.
Stevens. I mean, I always admired A&M Records, and I figured if I could ever get a record deal with A&M, that would be it. And I did, and that's what set my career going in the '70s.
And you were, when you got the invite to go do Soul Train, what was that? Tell me a little bit about that experience. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, it started off by the fact that I met Stevie Wonder by happenstance, you know, at a motel pool. And he happened to be singing one of my songs, and I was drawn to him, and he was with his brother, and we exchanged hugs. And he asked me to tour with him because Shaka Khan had gotten ill. So I was going to do 8 concerts with him. And I was on the road with Stevie, and I got a call from Don Cornelius and to do Soul Train. And I was happy. I was flattered because at that time, my first single, "People Gotta Move" off the Powerful People album, was top 10 on the R&B charts, which was kind of unheard of, you know,
Yeah.
for a white guy from Montreal. And but I did have a fro, so that was some kind of commonality we
Yeah.
shared in the '70s. And so Don asked me to do Soul Train, and I asked him as a favor to have us do a live version of it, and he agreed to it. And well, sometimes I'll just, someone sent me a link to the YouTube thing of me on Soul Train, and it just felt totally natural to me, you know,
Yeah.
just to go and share my stuff. Didn't
Which
feel
is so
nervous about
cool.
it at all.
Well, it's so cool. I mean, you were one of the very first. I think you were what, first or second, maybe Caucasian to ever, white guy
I
to
think it
ever
was the
appear on.
first. Yeah,
Yeah, on Soul Train. And it's such a monumental show, white, black, or otherwise. It really is a monumental show. And we're fortunate enough. Starvista Live does a Soul Train cruise, and I work closely with Tony Cornelius, Don's son, and
okay.
we talk a lot about the '70s and and the heyday of it, really, when it was at its prime. And uh he discusses all the time about how just fascinating the show was, and the different artists that they had on, and he talks all the time about it. People think it was just a black show, and it was predominantly an urban show, but he said we had some phenomenal, he mentioned Coffee, Elton was on, Tina Marie, other,
Bowie
just so
did.
many great
I
names.
believe Bowie.
Bowie, that's
Yeah,
right, Bowie, yeah.
yeah.
uh, and so it's cool, it's kind of it's a unique feather to have, though.
It was a great time in American culture because um, American culture was more interested in building bridges at that time.
Yeah,
And so if we, that was one of the greatest things the '70s had to offer, is that there was a great crossover culture building. And I was fortunate to be part of that. And that's why my concerts, I mean, they were, there was always at least a 30% black attendance, and um, many other fringe cultures that just
sure.
would be drawn to our concerts. And it always felt natural, and everyone got along really well, as if it was like, hey, no big deal.
Well, that's a testament to, I mean, not just the time, but you and the music as well. Music is a great equalizer in so many ways. Whether they call it urban or blue-eyed soul, or this or that, no matter which which bit of it you choose, everyone's allowed to like everything, and everyone has different tastes and desires. And I think that's a cool thing about it, is on each different cruise that Starvista does, it's fun to look out at an audience. And I'm sure it's similar for you every time you do a concert, right? You look out at your audience and you don't see one person. You see a lot of people with one common interest.
Yes.
which
Yeah,
is
and for me though, it's
fascinating.
something different though with touring though. It's really at a certain point it was looking for audience reaction,
Sure.
and then with enough bad things that happen in a career, I said no, I can't really rely on audience reaction to put on a good show. I've got to be able to put on a good show whether the audience is with me or not, and that sometimes is the hardest thing to do. So in some sense, I get on stage and hope the audience is going to come along with me for the ride.
Yeah.
But I close my eyes and get into it, and I kind of construct my own world, and hopefully we're having such a good time on stage that everyone's going to feel it out there.
Yeah.
But if I find that if I depend on the audience, then if there's someone doing something in the first row, then how can I concentrate on what I'm doing? So I didn't want to be that way anymore. And I was that way at a certain time. And it was a great event. I mean, that happened to me in Chicago somewhere in the early 90s, where I was experimenting with new music and half the audience walked out in this big room that I was playing. And I made a decision then, you know, that I was either going to chase the half that walked out or expand the half that stayed. And in order to expand the half that stayed, I had to actually be myself and actually explore myself and explore those inner reaches and bring the best out of what is inside so that they could be entertained and they could feel like they didn't spend their money for nothing or waste their money. So I changed my philosophy from that moment on.
And that carries through to today, I assume. I
Yep,
mean,
it does. And so whatever I'm going into, I always hope for a good audience. But if I'm going into situations not so good, uh, that's fine too, because I always walk off stage asking everybody in the band, how was it for you? Did you hear well? Monitors working fine? How'd you feel about this, feel about that? And once in a while we'll mention, well, people seem to enjoy it. And
yeah,
that's okay too. But the thrust is mainly, did we do our best?
yeah.
And because
I
that
mean,
feels good. That is the
sure,
real high.
sure,
There's
yeah,
really not much high in an audience enjoying something and you know that you were piss poor on stage.
yeah. You're lip syncing your way through something that, yeah, the
Well,
audience.
and there's a lot of enjoyment, and it's in a kind of way a very masochistic enjoyment when you know you say we were great. The audience sucked, but we were great.
Yeah, we killed. Those guys were terrible, but we killed. We killed. Well, listen, I've had you for about an hour, so I know you've got moles to go find. Before I let you go, tell us about what you're up to currently. Are you finding a way into the studio? Are you writing,
Yes,
producing?
I am producing right now a student who always wanted to do a record, a 12 of my songs, favorite of his song, my songs that he liked from the 70s on. So it's been very interesting to revisit the songs and reproduce them. And in some cases, I'm kind of enjoying this because it's giving me a chance to almost like to do a revised book
Yeah.
of poetry. So there's that. I'm also working on 3 to 6 new cuts to be released at the end of the year of mine. And I just finished producing 2 more cuts from Massimo Ranieri, pretty famous Italian artist, a singer, actor. And his record will be coming out this fall.
No rest for the weary.
Well, the studio is salvation in a sense. You know,
Sure.
it's really a place where I can exercise my inner demons.
Listen, we all need that, don't we?
Yep.
Uh, and I like to ask every artist and give them a chance at the end to discuss if they like, obviously we're all going through something unique here with
Yeah.
COVID-19. We're all
Yeah.
experiencing something very different than anyone has experienced before. Not to demean or put up or down any other experiences the world has had over the past 100 or so years, but this one's fairly unique. How are you guys doing with it? And how are you guys? Everyone feeling okay? Everyone, I mean, you and your wife there in Welch's, and you guys are doing all right?
Yes, of course. Yeah. We're being careful and all those things. Especially my wife has had major surgery in the last
Mm,
3 months, so she's
mm,
more vulnerable.
Sure.
And that's a long story, but she needs to be kept sort of under wraps, you know, for a while. So I need to watch where I'm going. I was really sick in January. When testing is available, I think I had it, you know, but we'll know for sure. You know, there is a lot of education to be gleaned from by studying the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu epidemic, you know, that killed 50 million people in 1918. 1918. Thankfully, there is no world war going on, because the World War I was really the instigator to really, in a sense, was the catalyst, because all the soldiers that were in the trenches that had Spanish flu, they'd go back home. And that's why every country, all the four corners of the globe got Spanish flu, and people didn't know how to deal with it then. And so I think because of all the mitigating that we've been doing, we're not going to see those kind of numbers, but people have to be careful. And of course, we're balancing it with, you know, reopening the world again, because life must go on, obviously.
Amen.
But thank you for the question, and we're fine. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Obviously watching this, we have not only, you know, cruise fans, but I'm sure your fans are tuning in as well, your specific fans, not just partners of the cruise. Any messages you have for the folks out there that are fighting through?
Yeah, I think we all know how difficult it is, but the difficulty usually is more in your mind than it is in reality, because the country has food. You know, some people may have lost their jobs and all, but people are trying to help them through this. You know, the government's trying, you know, to help people through this. I would say that it's really time to dig in the way you know how to dig in, whether it be through prayer, through religion, through psychology, through friends, whatever it is. But it's time to know yourself. And when you know yourself, you won't break. You know that you're pretty resilient. You can go through this, and you know somewhere deep inside it'll be over. If not soon, pretty soon.
That's a wonderful message. That's a really wonderful message, and I greatly appreciate you sharing not only your time but your thoughts as well. You're very generous, and I know I speak on behalf of everyone when I say thank you to you. And allow me to thank everybody out there for watching as well. Thanks for tuning in, whether you are a 70s rock and romance fan or just a Starvista live cruiser or just a general music fan. Tune in to find some good news and some fun chat with your friend, Mr. Gino Vannelli. I'm your virtual cruise host, Jason. Thank you again for tuning in. And thank you, sir, for taking your time to be with us. Much, much appreciated. Take care, everybody out there. Make sure you wash your hands, stay safe, stay tuned in to YouTube. Keep an eye on this channel. More content coming soon. Be well, everyone. We'll see you soon.